We're gonna be talking about reverbs.
Yes! 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 Yes!
How many of you are like, okay, now I'm mixing and now I have to add reverbs? No problem. I've got the reverb plugins and I know about convolution reverb and plate reverbs and spring reverbs and algorithmic digital reverbs. What do? I know the theory, right? For high-pitched instruments, we can usually add more reverb. For low pitch, we're gonna keep it a little bit drier because then it gets muddy. The ostinatos, you don't wanna wash out that. You don't wanna add a lot of reverb. For the slow, high-pitched, long notes, we can add more reverb there. Whenever we wanna push things back, more reverb. When I have them closer in your face, less reverb. It's like, yeah, I get all that. Now what? Let's talk about first options when it comes to mixing. Whenever you see a track like this is just a track. And whenever you see things that have no waveform, this is like a bass. Option number one, you could add reverbs to each one of the tracks that you have. Option number two is using basses. Let's say a short, medium, and long reverb. That's just like the standard classical approach. I'm gonna have 3 reverbs, and depending on what I need, I'm gonna create a send, and I'm gonna send it to that bus, and that is going to create the reverb that I need. Sometimes we don't even need that much. Sometimes we just need like a convolution reverb, the room, and then a digital algorithmic reverb, like longer tail type of thing. Now, limitations regarding that, well, if you have to deliver stems, like you've got your mix, and you have to deliver your mix to the dubbing session, they are gonna mix your music with the dialogue and the sound effects. It's good for you to send them stems. So they have like the percussion, the melodic orchestral instruments, maybe like the bass and lead. You're gonna look at the entire soundtrack and you're gonna pick the track that's the busiest, and you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna divide this track in these 4 parts, in these 4 steps, whatever it is. If you're using the bass in sense technique, then you can't do that because the bass is going to be routed to the master stereo track at the end, and then you won't be able to separate the reverb. The other option that you have is still using that bass approach, send to the bass, group by group. So for example, we've got all these strings. First I created one bass, which is this strings bass. All these strings tracks, as you can see up here, are routed to the strings bass. So the output, literally the output of these tracks, string tracks, is routed here. I'll be able to print those 5 basses that I've got, one for strings, one for brass, etc., and have them separated. I've got 2 reverbs for the strings. I have a hall reverb and a room reverb. This is a convolution reverb, and this is just an algorithmic digital reverb. But then these 2 reverbs now here are routed to this bass here. So the output of these reverbs, you can see, goes to this strings bass. And that means that when I export the kind of like the strings group, everything is under this strings bass. And I do the same for brass and woods. Room for brass and woods, and hall for brass and woods. Woodwind short, horns, trumpets, low brass, and brahms. This is what I happen to have. And here's the main bass for this group, and then here are the 2 reverbs that are also routed to this main. It's the same system, but it just divided in a per group basis, if that makes sense. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is I'm just gonna insert the reverb in each track. I like that way. It's very simple. You've got the high strings to make it seem like it's in the same room and gonna have the same reverb inserted in other groups. I've got enough CPU, I can do that. I usually do it that way. It'll have plugins and all that. Plugins will take CPU power. Many of them are UAD, go directly to the UAD card processing. Sometimes I just load the tracks. I do volume automation, I do positioning, I do rebalance panning, and I add the plugins that I need, and then I add the reverbs. I'm done. Sometimes though, what you can have is a mixing template. It is nice to have those basses already set up with the reverbs already set up, because I find myself always loading the same plugin, using the same reverbs. I've got my hall reverb, I've got my convolution reverb, my room reverb, I've got my plates reverb for percussion, I've got my gated reverb for short percussive, things like this. I have a series of basses that I've got ready that I can duplicate, like with the reverbs and the delays and things like this that I use all the time. And I've got a basic routing with different groups that then I'll rename, so the brass, the woods, the percussion, for exporting stems. Hopefully that gives you an idea that there are 2 different approaches. Let's talk about the basics. Usually we're gonna have more reverb for high-pitched instruments, and then we're gonna have less reverb or none low-pitched instruments. What is the muddy area? The 300, 400, 200 cycles. It's orchestral music, it already gets muddy down there. So we don't want to add more reverb there. Careful with that area and below, because things get muddy. So the less sonic information that we've got in that area, the better. Plus reverb, it's just basically what it's doing is just making the decay longer. Even for staccatos, for percussion, the conflicting decays, reverb is not helping avoid that problem. It's actually making it worse. The orchestra usually is in one room, and that is the room reverb. Why would I have more reverb for the highest strings and less reverb for the lowest strings? That makes no sense. It's gonna make it sound like it's in a different... What we're talking here, it's subtle. And the second thing is, this is not realistic orchestral music.
What?
Like if you wanna emulate that sound, then just add one reverb on top of the orchestra to kind of like emulate or enhance that room that they've already been recorded in one big room, so that has that room component on it. But these days, whatever we identify as orchestral sound, it's not even an orchestra. It's overproduced orchestral music, what we are used to here these days. And it's a more modern sound where we have more control over things, and because we do have that control over things, because we've got more separation than ever before, then we can do things that enhance the sound. So for long notes, we can have more reverb. There's not much activity going on. The more activity that there's, if we add reverb, we're gonna wash that out. We wanna avoid that. So short or ostinatos, things like this, less reverb, and then you've got any combination of that. So if it's high, long notes, harmonics, violins, long note, ton of reverb is gonna sound good, no problem. But if you got now the other combination with the cellos, ostinato, then just be careful. You can add a little bit of room component, maybe a little bit of hall reverb as well, but not that much. A long reverb is gonna be like 3.8 seconds. That is gonna be long, very long. Short reverb, 1.2. In that realm, 1.8, 2.8 is kind of like a mid reverb. This is what you're looking for from a reverb. Nice, even, natural sounding decay. Reverbs are super important. It can make or break your music, so make sure that it's a good reverb, sounds good, especially for the long ones. Let's go a little bit more in depth. Sometimes I have more reverbs. Panoramic reverb is for long sustained string, right? Like long sustained string, sustained brass, choir, tracks that need wide, and here's the concept, wide and wet sound. You can have an instrument that sounds very thin, very pinpointed, like an oboe maybe, but the reverb can be very wide. It's gonna open the sound. The main source is still pinpointed, still thin, but the reverb can be wide, and you can choose how wide the reverb can be. That's very important. Impact reverb is gonna be still wide, but shorter. For spiccato, brass stabs, woodwinds. So it's, for that other orchestral group that's doing the short notes, we still wanna feel it big, but a little bit shorter to avoid those conflicting decays and wash out and make things muddy. Sometimes I use a convolution reverb, which is a room reverb, and I just add that instead of the hall reverb because it has a faster decay. But it emulates a big room, and I make sure that it's wide. Reverb for bass instruments, usually it's like a smaller, faster reverb. And then reverb for percussion, usually it's gonna be different. I'll use a plates reverb or some sort of different reverb here, because it's good to separate the melodic orchestra and the percussive instruments. Usually I'll have also a gated reverb for percussion, so another reverb for other percussion, and then I'll usually have a reverb for synths and a reverb for special effects, things like this. All these high-pitched effects, glitches, I'll have a separate reverb for that. Special effect, I want to keep it separated. It's not part of the orchestral melodic instrument, so it's not gonna have like the same room reverb, the same hall reverb. Most likely a short reverb, but something that's a little bit of a depth and a space around this sound, because I still wanted to include it part of the mix. I want it to sound a little bit closer, but not super dry. Right now it's just dry. It needs a little bit of a space. I hope the video was entertaining, or at least useful. I think there was quite a bit of theory. So let me know in the comment if you'd like for my next video to be a little bit more practical, inside Cubase with plugins, so we can actually see the theory applied in real life. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Oh, and by the way, I think in the comments must be a link to a bundle of courses free. There's a mixing course included there, and obviously there's more information about reverb, in case that you cannot wait till next week. Alright, again, bye.